Winter in Chicago, the ballroom gleamed while nobody noticed the pale boy with braces sitting alone. Emily Carter did. She knelt, slid a bowl of steaming soup into his trembling hands, and broke the one rule everyone obeyed: wait for his father. The nurse gasped, the band fell silent, and a whisper cut the room in half: Vincent Romano's son. By the time security reached her, the spoon had already touched his lips, and a war had quietly started. Before we dive in, where are you watching from tonight? It was winter in Chicago, the kind of cold that sawed through coats and turned breath into tiny ghosts. Inside the Palmer House Hotel, chandeliers threw warm light over people who pretended philanthropy could be worn like a tuxedo. Emily Carter slid between tables with a practiced smile and a tray balanced on a sore wrist. Rent was late again. Tips were thin, and her father's insulin was a countdown ticking in her head. She kept moving, because movement meant heat, and heat meant she didn't have to think about the way security eyed anyone in a staff uniform like they were smuggling shame. Near the back of the ballroom, where the music softened and the fundraiser slogans grew quiet, she saw him. A small boy alone at a linen-draped table too big for his size. 8, maybe. Pale, with dark lashes and metal braces fastened around his thin legs, a nurse sat beside him, scrolling, a half-finished mocktail sweating on the table. No one stopped to say hello. People glanced, then glanced away, guilt evaporating under chandelier light. Emily lowered her tray. Would he like something to eat? The nurse didn't look up. He doesn't eat until his father says so. Emily followed the woman's gaze to the untouched plate: cold chicken, congealed sauce, a roll hard enough to throw. The boy's eyes flicked to the soup station where steam curled like quiet hope. Emily felt that old tug in her ribs, the one that remembered a pantry with more air than groceries, a father telling jokes to drown out an empty fridge. Rules kept rich rooms orderly, kindness kept people alive. "I'll be right back," she said, more to herself than to the nurse. At the service table, she lifted the ladle. Chicken noodle, fragrant with thyme. She tested the temperature with the back of her wrist, the way her grandmother taught her when money was short and burners were unreliable. She carried the bowl like it was made of glass and knelt so her eyes met the boy's. "No child should need permission to eat," she whispered. A flicker, surprise, then fear, then something like astonished relief. He took the spoon with hands that trembled and tasted. His shoulders loosened. He took another bite. The smallest sound escaped him. Not a laugh exactly, just a breath that remembered joy. Across the table, the nurse finally noticed. The phone dropped with a thud. "What do you think you're doing?" Heads turned. Music stuttered. Emily rose slowly, palms open. "Feeding him." "You can't. Do you know whose child this is?" the nurse hissed, already waving at security. "Take that away right now." The boy flinched at the volume, spoon clinking against porcelain. Emily kept her voice low and steady. "It's soup. He's hungry." The closest donors leaned in, curiosity chasing cruelty. A tuxedoed man whispered, and the whisper rippled outward like spilled champagne. Names drifted through the air with the certainty of rumor. Romano. Vincent Romano. The room changed temperature, warmer in light, colder in heart. A security guard in a black suit appeared at Emily's elbow, the polite menace of hotels and high money. "Ma'am, I need you to step away." "She's staff," the nurse snapped. "She's done." Emily bent, her mouth near the boy's ear. "Finish if you can, okay? Slow sips." He stared at the spoon like it had become a compass pointing home. "Thank you," he breathed. Such a small sound, it carried anyway. The guard cleared his throat. "Now." Emily straightened. "I'm coming." She set the empty tray on the nearest sideboard and turned, but a voice, thin, careful, stopped her. "Please," the boy said, barely audible. "She's nice." Conversation froze. The band, sensing something that couldn't be accompanied, fell silent mid-measure. The nurse's cheeks flushed a hard, defensive red. Mr. Romano will hear about this. The name landed with a dull collective thud. Emily had never met the man, but everyone knew the stories whispered in kitchens and loading docks. Power that didn't need announcements. Promises that never required a second warning. She looked at the boy one last time. In the reflection of the silver chafing dish, she saw herself. Tired eyes, hair escaping its bun, a woman who'd learned to stand between rules and what was right. Her chest ached, not from fear, but from the way the room weighed kindness like contraband. The guard guided her toward the side exit where staff disappeared like smoke. The event manager trotted beside them, smile stretched tight. "Completely inappropriate," he said through clenched teeth. "We have protocols." "You have a hungry child," Emily replied. Or did. "Do you want to be fired?" She almost laughed. "You can't fire me twice." Outside the ballroom doors, the corridor was cooler, the carpet swallowing sound. Emily paused and glanced back. Through the gap, she saw the boy lift the spoon again, stubborn as a sunrise. Something in her steadied. If trouble was coming, it would come for a reason she could live with. The guard tapped the elevator button, avoiding her eyes the way decent men do when decency is inconvenient. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "Me too." The doors slid open. Somewhere behind them, a glass clinked, a phone buzzed, a rumor metastasized. By the time the music fully stopped, Emily Carter was already being escorted out of the ballroom for feeding the wrong child. That night, snow fell over the city like ash. Emily sat on the bus stop steps, coat torn, counting the dollars she didn't have. Her father, a retired veteran battling diabetes and PTSD, needed medication tomorrow. Now, she had no job, but she didn't regret it. "At least he ate," she murmured, watching her breath fade in the cold. Across town, in a high-rise office with bulletproof windows, Vincent Romano watched the security footage over and over. In it, his son smiled, something he hadn't done in months. Vincent's face, carved in stone, softened for just a second. Then he whispered to himself, "Find her." The bus never came on time when you needed it. Emily checked her cracked phone, skimmed a termination email that dressed cruelty in HR language. "Violation of protocol," it read, commas marching, calm, indifferent. She laughed once, short, surprised at the sound. A wind gust lifted the hem of her uniform and stung her knees. She did the math again. Rent, insulin, bus fare, the overdue light bill. Numbers rearranging themselves into the same impossible picture. A plow roared past, throwing slush onto her shoes. "Perfect," she said, because sometimes you had to choose which thing to cry about, and tonight wasn't the night. The next bus groaned into view. She grabbed the rail, rode with her head against a fogged window, watched the city move in silhouettes, corner stores shuttering early, a man walking a dog in boots that cost more than a week of groceries, the river coughing steam. At her stop, the world narrowed to the hiss of the doors and the sting of cold on her face. She climbed 3 flights to a hallway that smelled faintly of pepper and laundry soap and knocked with the rhythm her dad liked. 2 short, 1 long. "M?" His voice from the couch, gravel wrapped in warmth. She slipped inside, shut the draft out with a hip, and found him under a blanket. TV sound low, a mug of tea cooling on a coaster he insisted on using, even though the table was already scarred. His hair had more silver than last winter, his hands steadier tonight than most nights. He'd fallen asleep sitting up again, like the body never quite left watch. He blinked himself fully awake, found her face, found the wet marks on her shoes. Shift go late? She could have lied, smoothed the world to keep him from worrying. He would see through it anyway. "It ended," she said. "Early." He studied her for a beat. The way men trained to read danger can also read disappointment. "We'll be fine," he said, automatic, a promise built from stubbornness. We always are. She set her bag down, peeled off the damp coat, moved through the kitchen, muscle memory in motion. A pot, a can of tomatoes, a clove of garlic, a handful of pasta she'd been stretching for 3 days. The burner clicked, caught. The room filled with the kind of warmth money couldn't buy. He watched her in that quiet way he had, gratitude and worry braided together. Pharmacy called, he said the refill's ready. I'll pick it up first thing. She didn't add the part where the cost made her throat tighten. We'll figure it out. His gaze slid to the TV, then back. You fed someone, he said, certainty without question. She nodded. A boy, 8 maybe, braces on his legs. They said he couldn't eat until his father said so. I couldn't. Good, he said, and the word felt like a hand on her shoulder. You did good. Across the river, elevators hushed open onto glass and winter. Vincent stood with his hands in his pockets, the city a constellation of decisions he'd made and debts he'd paid. The footage replayed, Emily kneeling, the spoon, his son's face unlocking. A quiet he hadn't felt in months settled over him, dangerous in its gentleness. Get me the catering roster, he told Marco, a man who'd followed him since their shoes were cheap. Start with the temp agency, then the hotel. Marco nodded once. And Marco, Vincent added, the edge returning to his voice. No mess. A pause. No fear. Understood. In the kitchen, Emily stirred pasta until it surrendered, split the bowl, stole extra sauce into her dad's portion when he wasn't looking. They ate on the couch, knees touching, the TV painting light on the wall. A late-night anchor talked about a cold front, about traffic pileups, about the charity gala like it was a weather report. Emily muted the sound, let silence do the talking. Her dad reached for her hand and squeezed, once, twice, then let go like a man who knew when to loosen his grip. When he drifted back to sleep, she opened the cupboard where the emergency envelopes lived. There were 3, electric, rent, pharmacy, thin as paper should be. She slid the pharmacy one out, tucked what cash she had inside, felt the lightness of it. At least he ate, she said again, softer, not asking permission from anyone. Outside, a black sedan idled 2 blocks away, exhaust blooming white in the alley mouth. Marco sat behind the driver, reading names off a printout, crossing off the ones who didn't match. A clerk at the hotel had been helpful. People were always helpful when their boss's name was whispered the right way. Carter, Marco said. Emily. West Belmont. The driver nodded, turned the wheel, let the city unspool under the tires. Dawn edged the blinds when Emily finally slept, light, alert, the kind of rest that could stand up fast if the past knocked. Snow kept falling, quieter now. Her phone buzzed once on the counter and went still. Somewhere in the stairwell, footsteps, careful, respectful. A pause outside her door, then a knock that wasn't the landlord's, wasn't a neighbor's, wasn't trouble in the shape she usually recognized. The city held its breath, because kindness had started something that wouldn't be ignored. Morning light crept over the greasy windows of Bluebird Diner, turning the chrome trim into a tired kind of gold. Emily poured coffee for construction workers who talked with their hands because words were too slow at 6 a.m. The grill hissed, the radio crackled out Motown under static, and the bell over the door kept chiming like it had an anxious heart. She moved table to table with the rhythm of a metronome, cream, sugar, check, until the sound of engines outside pressed a palm over the whole room. Conversation thinned. Forks paused mid-air. 3 black SUVs slid to the curb in a perfect line. Doors opened in a choreography that didn't waste a single step. Men in dark coats, earpieces, the kind of quiet that spoke fluently. The regulars went still. Chicago knows how to mind its own business when the wrong kind of organization shows up. Maggie, the owner, froze behind the register with a hand on the till like it was a friend she might need to defend. Then he stepped in. Vincent Romano, 40-something, sharp jaw, colder eyes. He didn't fill the doorway with size. He filled it with focus. He took in the diner once, the quick way a person reads a room to measure exits and the distance to trouble. He saw Emily. Emily Carter? Her hands tightened around the coffee pot. Yes? My son hasn't eaten since you left, he said, each word placed like a piece on a board. He asked for you by name. Behind him, a smaller shape hovered in the doorway. The boy in braces. Ethan. Bundled in a wool coat, collar crooked like he'd resisted being dressed by other hands. His gaze found Emily and steadied there. The nurse stood 2 steps back, posture nervous, phone tucked away for once. Emily's pulse jumped hard enough to feel. She put the pot down. Is he okay? He will be, Vincent said. If you come. He set a thick envelope on the counter without looking at it. Personal attendant to Ethan. Salary, $200,000 a year, housing included, car, insurance, everything you need to stop counting dollars next to bus steps. The envelope lay there, ordinary and obscene. Emily glanced at Maggie, who gave the smallest shake of her head, then a tiny nod. Fear and blessing, both. A line cook coughed and remembered he had eggs on the flat top. Life pretended to continue. Emily exhaled. I can't work for a man like you. The room forgot how to breathe. Vincent didn't blink. He let the refusal hang long enough to see if it would wilt under its own weight. It didn't. He shifted his stance a fraction. Some unseen calculation adjusting. You fed my son when everyone else followed rules. I'm not asking you to like me. I'm asking you to do for him what you did last night. She shook her head. That's not a job. That's decency. Then consider it paid decency, he said. No smile, no threat. Just the sense that decisions around this man had consequences that never arrived alone. A voice, soft, careful, moved in behind him. Please, Ethan whispered. She looks at me like I'm not broken. Something in Emily's chest pulled taut. The boy stood very straight without quite standing tall, chin lifted the way kids do when they want to be brave for someone else. His braces flashed when he shifted his weight. The nurse's eyes softened and then hardened again, like she'd been trained to correct her own humanity. Emily looked at the boy, then at his father. If anyone hurts him, I walk away, no matter the money. Vincent's lips twitched, almost a smile, like he recognized a clause and respected its clarity. Deal. Maggie slid a damp towel across a clean spot that didn't need it. Her dad's meds, she said suddenly, voice rough. They're due today. Vincent didn't turn. Text the pharmacy address to the number on the card, he told Marco, who had appeared without sound. They'll be delivered by noon. He faced Emily again. You'll have a room in our house. You'll have keys. And you'll have authority to overrule anyone, including me, if it concerns Ethan's health. Think of yourself as the person who says yes when the world says wait. It should have scared her. Instead, it felt like the ground offered her a plank across the ice. He stays in school? Yes. He eats when he's hungry? Yes. He learns to make his own choices, one at a time, even small ones. A pause. Yes. Then I'll do it, she said quietly. The diner exhaled like a storm had just crossed over them and kept going. Marco took a step forward with something that looked like a simple contract printed on heavy paper. Emily didn't reach for it. No NDAs about wrongdoing, she said. I won't be gagged if harm comes near him. You won't need one, Vincent said, and for the first time his voice carried warmth without heat. He glanced at Ethan. Thank the lady. Ethan's smile was small and bright. Thank you, he added, after a beat. Can we get pancakes? Emily felt laughter rise, quick, grateful, stunned. Yeah, we can get pancakes. Maggie moved like her feet had remembered how. flipping batter with an efficiency that belonged on a clock. "On the house," she said, and when Vincent started to object, she cut him off with a look that could sand wood. "On the house." They ate in a booth by the window. The most powerful man in the room, the boy in braces, the waitress who had said no before she said yes. Emily watched Ethan hold the fork, watched him choose syrup, watched him decide. Little things, they built bigger things. When the plates were empty and the check sat ignored, Vincent stood. "We leave now." Emily glanced toward the back, where her locker held a spare sweater and a photo strip with her dad making faces. "Give me 5 minutes." She tucked her apron under the counter, squeezed Maggie's hand, found the bathroom, and locked the door. In the mirror, a woman looked back, tired, steady, eyes bright with something like fear braided with purpose. She splashed water on her face, counted to 10, and stepped into a different life. Outside, the SUVs waited, quiet, ready. Emily slid into the back seat beside Ethan. He leaned toward the window, breath fogging the glass, drawing a wobbly, smiley face with one finger. The convoy pulled away from the curb as the city blinked into full mourning. Snow hushed along the curb, traffic lights changing like metronomes, 1,000 tiny rules holding a place together. Somewhere between the diner and the river, Emily's phone lit with a pharmacy message, "Paid, ready for pickup." She closed her eyes for a second, felt the car's warmth, heard Ethan hum under his breath. When she opened them, the skyline cut the pale sky like a promise, because kindness had gotten her here. But what came next would require something harder: boundaries, courage, and the willingness to stand between a boy and a world that treated him like a trophy with a pulse. The Romano estate in Lake Forest rose out of the snow like a verdict, glass catching pale winter sun, stone shoulders squared against the wind. The gate opened without hurry, cameras blinking awake as the convoy rolled in. Emily watched manicured trees pass in rows so neat they felt rehearsed. The air smelled like money and fear. They stopped beneath a porte-cochere that could shelter a concert hall. The front doors stood 3 times taller than necessary, dark wood polished to an almost mirror. A woman waited there, posture razor straight, hands folded at the precise center of her coat. "Miss Carter," she said, voice like frost on steel. "I'm Mrs. Aldridge, house manager." No hand offered. "People like you don't last here." Emily met the chill with neutral warmth. "People like me feed children when they're hungry." She didn't smile. She didn't apologize. Inside, marble floors amplified footsteps into rules. Art clung to walls like trophies, signed photographs, a painting that looked expensive because it didn't look like anything. Staff moved quietly, eyes forward, every motion measured. The place was beautiful, but lifeless, the way a museum is beautiful when no one laughs. Mrs. Aldridge guided her down a long corridor where the temperature seemed to drop another degree every 10 feet. "You will observe schedule and protocol," she said, listing times the way a metronome lists beats. "Therapies at 9 and 3, educational sessions at 11, no outside food, no unauthorized visitors. No unscheduled noise." A glance, as if noise meant children existing. "Understood," Emily said, filing each rule in a mental drawer labeled "We'll see." Ethan's suite occupied the east corner overlooking the frozen lawn. The door opened onto quiet machines, an oxygen concentrator at rest, a rolling cart with neatly labeled supplies, a hospital-grade bed tucked against the wall beside a window whose blinds were half closed, as if light needed permission too. A whiteboard held a week mapped in boxes. No posters, no crayons, no Lego minefield underfoot, no music. Ethan sat in a supportive chair, braces visible beneath soft pants, hands folded like a boy afraid to crease the day. The nurse, same one from the gala, stood at a polite distance, phone out of sight now. "Good morning," Emily said, keeping her voice steady, low. I brought the most dangerous thing in the world. He blinked. What? Stories. She walked to the window and stopped. If I open these 2 inches, will anyone faint? Silence. She tilted the slats. Pale sun moved across the floor like a shy guest. The room remembered it had dimensions. House policy is, the nurse began. That Ethan's health comes first, Emily finished gently. Light regulates mood and sleep cycles. 2 inches. A beat. We'll keep it here unless his doctor says otherwise. The nurse hesitated, then nodded once, surprised to have been invited to agree. The intercom on the wall hummed alive, a crisp voice asking for Mrs. Aldridge. Something about deliveries. She excused herself with a thin smile that said this conversation wasn't over. Emily crossed to the built-in speakers and lowered the overhead LEDs until the glare softened into a room that belonged to people. Do you like music? He shrugged. Sometimes. Me too. She scanned the console. Whoever designed the house had loved analog, hidden behind sleek panels, a turntable nested like a secret. A shelf held vinyl, Ellington, Fitzgerald, a worn Armstrong pressing that looked played more than once upon a time. How about something old and stubborn? She set the record. Needle down. Trumpet, warm and human, uncurled into the air. In the kitchen, Chef Lila, tall, focused, hands smelling faintly of rosemary, eyed Emily like a new ingredient. No outside food, she said automatically. Then make inside food, Emily answered. Grilled cheese, real butter, not whatever margarine calls itself these days. Tomato soup on the side. We'll start with half a sandwich. We can adjust for salt. She waited for the pushback. Chef Lila's mouth almost curved. He refuses solids at lunch. Then we give him a win by giving him control. Emily held up a small timer from the counter. We'll make a game out of warm versus lukewarm, crunchy versus soft. He gets to call it. Chef Lila nodded once, impressed despite herself, and griddled bread until the room smelled like kitchen childhood. Back in the suite, Emily dragged a lamp closer, switched it on, and sat cross-legged on the floor where the world feels less formal. Today's story, she said, is about a pilot who forgot how to fly and learned again, one lever at a time. She never said soldier. She never said hospital. She moved the pieces without naming the board. Ethan leaned in, eyes tracking her hands as if they drew the sky. She slid the plate onto a tray. 2 choices, 1 bite crunchy, 1 bite soft. You tell me which one wins. He hesitated, then chose crunchy. He chewed, surprised. It's good. Dangerous, she said solemnly. Might cause smiling. He snorted, an almost laugh that startled him into a real one. It burst out, bright, unpracticed, the sound of a window finally opening all the way. The nurse flinched, then relaxed, eyes stinging before she remembered she wasn't supposed to have eyes. Upstairs, in the shadowed office with a long view of the lake, Vincent stopped mid-call. Hold, he told the line, hand lifting before he realized it had moved. Sound traveled oddly in a house that preferred silence, but this came clear. Laughter, his son's, like a bell rung in a chapel he hadn't visited in months. Something inside him shifted, not much, just enough to remind Bone it was wrapped in muscle. Marco stood at the doorway, reading a room the way he read streets. He didn't ask. He didn't need to. Vincent set the phone down, stepped closer to the glass, watched light skitter on ice. Who is she? He said softly. Not a question, not quite an answer either. He listened again, as if the house itself had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. Downstairs, Emily reset the timer. Best of 3? She asked. Best of 5, Ethan said, grinning now. Deal. Ethan began to eat again, to speak, to live. It happened in inches, not miles. 2 bites at breakfast, 3 questions before lunch, a joke whispered into the seam of a blanket like secrets needed fabric to hold them. The house noticed. Schedules bent a little. Lights stayed warmer. Chef Lila started setting aside tiny ramekins so Ethan could choose between dill and no dill, crunchy or soft, more soup or less. Choice became a language. Control, someone else's, started losing its accent. That terrified the people who'd built their jobs on compliance. The medical whiteboard, once a grid of commands, turned into a map Ethan helped draw, stickers for wins, a star when he asked for what he wanted without looking for permission first. The staff stood a few steps back from that board like it might change them, too. Head nurse Lydia chose not to move at all. She was early 40s precise, a woman who ironed guidelines until they could cut. Her notes were immaculate, her tone never raised, her power hidden in the word protocol. That afternoon, she found Emily in Ethan's room, sunlight set to gentle, Armstrong crooning low, grilled cheese quartered into triangles like small, edible victories. "You're interfering with his treatment," Lydia said, standing between Emily and the whiteboard, as if bodies made better walls than ideas. Emily kept her voice even. "I'm feeding a kid and letting him decide which triangle wins." "He requires a structured feeding plan administered by clinical staff," Lydia replied, syllables clipped. "Your improvisations may compromise outcomes. He eats for you and refuses with us. This is reinforcement of maladaptive preference." "You're starving a child to prove control," Emily said. "That's not treatment. That's fear with a clipboard." Ethan's eyes bounced between them, hope and dread wrestling in the space between his braces and the floor. The nurse at the doorway swallowed, wanting to be invisible. The timer on the dresser ticked. Steady, somehow louder than voices. The air pulled tight. "Enough," Lydia said. "From now on, you will clear every decision with me." "From now on," Emily said, "every decision starts with him." The door opened. Vincent stepped in. No announcement, no hurry. The room shifted its weight to accommodate him. Marco hovered behind, like a shadow willing to move. Mrs. Aldridge appeared 2 breaths later, spine aligned with the doorframe, ready to measure damage. Vincent didn't ask what was happening. He listened. Lydia explained, language polished, justifications stacked like glassware. "Boundaries are essential," she concluded. "The child's compliance is critical. Ms. Carter is undermining clinical authority." Emily didn't move from the floor. "He ate," she said. "He laughed. He asked for seconds. That's the data." Silence. Thick, exact. Vincent's eyes found Ethan's plate, the half-eaten triangle, the smear of melted cheese, the small cup of soup growing a skin. He looked at his son. "Do you want her here?" Ethan nodded once, small, decisive. Vincent turned back to Lydia. "If he eats with her and not with you—" He paused, eyes like steel. "You're fired." The word didn't rise. It landed. Lydia blinked, as if the floor had forgotten to be where she expected it. "You can't replace a team overnight," she said quietly, a last argument that sounded more like prayer than power. "Watch me," Vincent said. Within minutes, calls, clicks, a quiet stampede, the entire medical team was gone. IDs surrendered, carts rolled out. The whiteboard left like a country after a sudden border change. Mrs. Aldridge coordinated the extraction with the efficiency of someone who could break down a gala in under an hour. Marco walked the hall and returned with a list of vetted pediatric specialists who did not treat children like levers. Lydia paused at the threshold, hand on the frame as if grip could halt gravity. She looked at Emily, not with tears, not with pleading, just the hard clarity of someone who'd lost a piece of herself. "You have no idea what kind of world you just walked into." Emily held her gaze. "I do. It's the kind where the smallest person ends up paying the biggest bill." Lydia's mouth tightened. She left without slamming the door. The quiet she took with her felt colder than noise. The room exhaled, then waited. Emily reset the timer, slid the plate closer. "Best of 7?" she asked, letting her voice find its soft edge. Ethan smiled, tired, brave. "Best of 9. Vincent watched his son choose another bite, watched him chew without looking for permission. The muscle in his jaw unclenched. He turned to Emily. "I'll need a transition plan by tonight," he said, business returning to his tone. "New clinicians, new schedule, no gaps in care. Whatever you need. Lila, Marco, outside consults." "I'll need a speech therapist who listens," Emily said. "An OT who doesn't design obstacles to feel useful, and a pediatrician who returns calls." "You'll have them," he said. He started toward the door, stopped, then faced her fully. The house held its breath. "Welcome to my world. Around here, kindness can get you killed." Emily nodded once. "Then we'll teach kindness to fight back." Something flickered in Vincent's eyes. Approval or warning. Maybe both. He left. Marco tipped his chin at Emily. Respect, alliance, then followed. Mrs. Aldridge lingered a second at the door, taking in the record spinning, the light, the boy with cheese on his lip, and a decision in his hand. "Lunch is at 1, she said automatically, then corrected herself, softer. "When he's ready." Emily set the timer, leaned in, and whispered like conspirators do. "Round 3. Begins now." Rumors moved faster than heat through the Romano estate. Thin, precise, and always a step ahead of the truth. By noon, a florist's assistant whispered to a driver, who whispered to a housekeeper, who whispered to a cousin on the payroll, that the new girl was replacing the late Mrs. Romano, the wife who died in a car explosion meant for her husband. By dusk, marble halls carried the echo as if stone could gossip. Emily heard pieces of it in the kitchen when Chef Lila turned down a burner and said nothing, in the linen room when folded towels paused mid-stack, in the way Mrs. Aldridge's instructions arrived measured, but less sharp than yesterday. She didn't correct anyone. She set schedules instead. OT in the morning with a specialist who spoke to Ethan like a teammate, speech in the afternoon with a therapist who let silence stretch without fear, reading time after dinner because stories trained brains to imagine choices. Ethan ate 3/4 of a grilled cheese and then, on his own, asked for soup before bed. He chose dill. He chose crunchy. He chose... and each choice stitched him back to himself. At night, the house rearranged itself into privacy and old ghosts. Emily learned the routes by instinct, how the east corridor sighed near the heating vent, how the third step to the library complained if you didn't take it from the edge, how the balcony above the atrium turned people into silhouettes. Sometimes, past midnight, she'd find Vincent alone in the study with one lamp on, a glass of whiskey untouched, and an old photo held like evidence. A woman, dark hair, laughing eyes, caught mid-spin on a summer lawn. He never said her name. Grief didn't need invitations. He spoke even less about the explosion. The staff didn't either. The city did enough for everyone. On the 4th night, she brought a blanket back from the laundry and hesitated at the threshold of that lamplit room. He didn't look up. The ice in his glass had collapsed into water, a quiet surrender. "Do you think kindness can fix a man like me?" he asked, voice low enough that the question felt borrowed from a younger throat. Emily didn't hesitate. "It doesn't fix you," she said. "It reminds you you're still human." He turned the photo, set it face down as if to give the memory rest. In that averted moment, the Mafia boss looked less like a king, and more like a man who hadn't forgiven himself in years. He nodded once, the kind of agreement that didn't cancel disagreement, then lifted the glass and didn't drink. "Human," he said, barely audible, like the word might break if handled wrong. Footsteps in the hall, Marco drifting by, checking locks he trusted more than people. He glanced in, measured the room, kept moving. Safety, in this world, was a choreography no one applauded. Downstairs, Ethan waited in the den beneath a soft lamp, chessboard centered on a leather ottoman. He'd learned the names as if they were new friends: rook, knight, bishop, their odd movements like secrets only patience could hear. Emily played white so he could answer. She told him stories about a pilot who forgot how to fly and learned again, one lever at a time, then mapped that idea onto a board where pawns proved survival counted too. "Why do pawns move slow?" he asked. "So they can see more," she said. "Fast is loud, slow is smart." He pushed a pawn one square and looked up with that shy, defiant smile that had started visiting his face again. "Check. Soon." The balcony above the den held shadow and height. Vincent stood there, hands on the rail, a figure carved into the dark. He watched his son choose, hesitate, choose again. He watched Emily wait without rushing, redirect without scolding, celebrate a small trap sprung with a small grin. The house, usually allergic to noise, seemed to lean toward the soft click of pieces on wood. He realized he feared something more than betrayal. He feared hope. Betrayal he could read, tells at the table, phone calls at odd hours, loyalty that tasted like sugar and rot. Hope was quieter. It came disguised as a boy reaching for a rook with steady fingers, as laughter that didn't apologize, as a woman who refused to disappear behind protocol. Hope asked different things. It didn't demand blood, it demanded change. "Your move," Emily said, not looking up at the balcony though she knew he was there. A knight hopped, L-shaped, awkward and determined. He smiled despite himself. Later, when the board was reset and Ethan tucked under a blanket that smelled like laundry and jazz, Emily checked the door alarms, then found the study empty. The photo lay face down on the desk. She didn't touch it. She left a note in the neatest handwriting she owned. "Ethan wants oatmeal tomorrow, cinnamon, no raisins," and set it on the blotter because ordinary requests were another kind of prayer. In the hall, Mrs. Aldridge awaited like a verdict softened by time. "The house will expect you at breakfast," she said, tone neutral, almost kind. "We observe family meals on Fridays." "Is this Friday a family?" Emily asked. Mrs. Aldridge considered the question as if it required architecture. "We'll see." On her way back to the den, Emily paused under the balcony, looked up into the dark where she felt Vincent still standing in memory, if not in body. "Good night," she said, normal as turning off a light. No answer. A beat. Then the bearish shift of air, like someone had nodded without wanting credit. In the morning, rumor would wake early, but so would Ethan's appetite. And somewhere between marble and glass, hope, uninvited, inconvenient, would keep learning the route to the kitchen. 3 weeks later, the city thawed just enough to make winter slick instead of sharp. The gala was at the Field Museum, stone lions watching the steps like they were tired of guarding old bones. Emily walked beside Ethan through a side entrance, security briefed, routes rehearsed, a wheelchair on standby if his legs asked for mercy. He wanted to walk. He did. Step, pause, step. The hall smelled like polished wood and perfume. Cameras fluttered from a distance, harmless as moths. Emily bent to fix his scarf. He whispered a joke about dinosaurs. She laughed. A photographer caught the moment where laughter looks like light. By morning, the internet exploded. Not a fire, a flood. Headlines learned to shout. "Mafia Boss's secret affair with his nanny." A thread stitched together images with captions that lied convincingly. Her adjusting Ethan's scarf became a kiss angle. Vincent, standing 3 feet away, became proximity. A hand on a chair back became possession. Someone spliced an old photo of Vincent in capri with an invented reflection that made Emily appear at his shoulder. The edits were good enough to fool the first look, and bad enough to enrage the second. Her phone lit and wouldn't stop. Unknown numbers. Messages without names, insults arranged like knives. She set the phone face down. It buzzed anyway. Her mother called from Joliet with tears in her voice. Honey, what is this? Are you safe? I'm all right, Emily said, steady because her mother needed steady. It's noise. They're saying they're wrong. A breath. Please don't read the comments. I won't. I tried. I'm proud of you. Me too, Emily said, softer. I love you. At the estate, damage control moved like weather. Mrs. Aldridge assembled staff, tone clipped but protective. No one speaks to media, not a word. If you see a camera at the gate, you tell security, not a lens. Marco doubled the perimeter, rerouted deliveries, replaced Emily's phone with a new number and a contact list that started with him. Chef Lila put soup on the stove, because soup fixes nothing and helps anyway. Ethan came down late, eyes rimmed pink. Did I do something wrong? No, Emily said, kneeling. You did something brave. You were seen being happy. Some people don't know what to do with that. He nodded, a brave boy pretending he didn't understand while understanding too much. He ate 4 spoonfuls, then 5. By afternoon, a hashtag with her name had climbed the charts and learned to hiss. A gossip site published a timeline that turned coincidences into choreography. A legal team sent takedown notices that vanished into the ocean. The house hummed with the quiet fury of people who keep things from getting worse. That night, Marco found her in the den and said, "He wants to see you," meaning Vincent, meaning the room upstairs with the glass that turned the lake into a cold, unblinking eye. Emily climbed the stairs, hearing each footfall like a countdown. She entered the office with her shoulders square and her heart running ahead. "If you're going to fire me," she said, "say it fast so I can spend the rest of the hour convincing Ethan to eat without me." Vincent stood near the window, city lights stacking into geometry. "They're fake," he said, calm, not kind. "My enemies do this. They destroy what's pure." He picked up a printout and put it down untouched, like the paper might stain. "They want me agitated, reactive. They want you gone. If you stay, they'll come after you next." Emily felt the truth land. Not fear exactly, calculation with a pulse. She saw her father's refills, her mother's fragile calm, the boy's hand pausing over a spoon. "If I leave," she said, "your son will stop eating." He looked at her a long time. The muscle in his jaw didn't move. The house seemed to tilt toward the space between them. He paused. "Then you stay," he said, "and from now on, you're family." The words didn't soften the room. They changed it. Marco's silhouette shifted at the door, plans already forming. "We'll relocate your parents if you wish," Vincent added, voice turning to logistics. "A condo with a doorman. Medical billed directly. New numbers. Legal will handle the sites. No interviews, no statements, no oxygen to the fire." "I won't hide," Emily said. "You won't need to," he answered. A beat. "But you will be guarded." She nodded. "On one condition. Ethan never sees a single headline." "Agreed." When she turned to go, he said her name for the first time the way a person says a truth they're not ready to examine. "Emily." She waited. "What you did at the museum, you looked at him like he belonged in the room." His gaze met hers, unarmed for a heartbeat. "He does." "Then we keep putting him in rooms," she said, and left before either of them mistook gratitude for permission. She found Ethan at the chessboard, knights tipped like questions. "Are you leaving?" he asked. "No," she said. "Not today, not tomorrow." He nudged a pawn forward 1 square, slow, smart. He ate 6 spoonfuls without counting, then 7. In the hall, Mrs. Aldridge passed with a stack of linens and the smallest exhale of relief. Upstairs, Vincent looked out at a lake that didn't move and tried to make peace with the one thing that scared him more than betrayal. hope, and the work it demanded. Lincoln Park, late morning. The therapy clinic sat over a cafe that smelled like cinnamon and wet coats, windows fogged by breath and effort. Ethan worked the parallel bars with his PT counting under her breath, 2 beats forward, 1 beat back, a rhythm stubborn enough to make progress. Emily sat by the window with a paper cup warming her hands, eyes on the street because vigilance had become a habit that didn't ask permission. A dark van drifted by, once, twice. A third slow circle that wasn't curiosity, it was timing. Her pulse sharpened. "Marco," she whispered into the mic pinned inside her coat, calm by force. "Blue van, corner." "Copy," came quick, low. 2 minutes out. She rose, set the cup down, positioned herself between the door and Ethan. The PT glanced up, read the air, shifted her body like a shield without making a show of it. A receptionist laughed at something on her screen. The elevator dinged. The hallway went wrong. 2 men stormed in with guns drawn. Emily didn't think. She moved. She shoved Ethan behind the desk, dropping low, turning her body into a wall that could talk. "Breathe," she said in his ear. "In, out, slow. We're okay." Gunfire cracked the ceiling, plaster dust, a fluorescent light stuttering. Pain ripped through her ribs like a hot hand, sharp, stunning. She sucked air, tasted metal, refused to fold. Ethan's terrified cry cut through the noise and found her spine. "I'm here," she said. "I'm here!" The first man vaulted the reception counter to flank the desk. The second swept the room with a barrel that wanted to own fear. Emily grabbed the rolling chair and shoved. It clattered into the closer man's shins. He staggered. Enough. She dragged Ethan tighter into the corner, covered his head with her palm, counted, listened. Footsteps on the stairs, fast, disciplined. Romano security burst through the door like a verdict. "Down!" someone shouted. The room contracted. Commands, a struggle, the smack of bodies against furniture, the bark of a single shot, controlled, final. One attacker down, another wounded and swearing, a gun skittering under a table, metal suddenly small. Emily's breath came thin. Heat pulsed under her coat. She pressed a hand to her side, felt nothing she wanted to describe. Ethan's fingers found hers and squeezed like he could pour his strength into her. "Don't go," he said. "I won't," she breathed. "You're safe." The building learned silence. Sirens in the distance argued with orders not to call anyone. Marco stepped in, face granite, weapon holstered because his hands were better at decisions. He knelt by Emily, eyes scanning, calculating. "It's a graze," he said after a beat, voice precise. "Messy, not deep." "Hurts," she said, because honesty mattered. "Good," he answered, meaning, "You're awake, you're here." He tore gauze, pressed, wrapped. "Stay with me." Vincent arrived minutes later, the hallway parting around him like people understood gravity. He saw Emily bleeding, his son sobbing, and the men who dared touch his family. Rage sculpted his face into something statues only hint at. He took a gun from a guard without looking. He stepped to the wounded attacker and raised the barrel, clean, cold. "Vincent," Marco warned, already too late. Emily grabbed his wrist. "If you kill them, your son will see a monster again." For the first time his hand trembled. The room narrowed to 3 people: the man he'd been, the boy he loved, the woman who refused to let one swallow the other. Ethan's eyes locked on his father, pleading, terrified, brave. Vincent swallowed a lifetime of reflex. He lowered the gun. Then he turned cold, the kind of cold that made people leave states. "Secure him," he told Marco, chin to the conscious attacker. "He talks today." He shifted to Emily, kneeling enough to meet her eyes, not enough to surrender. "Get her to the estate, no hospitals." He looked at the blood on his cuff and didn't flinch. She's under my protection now. PT, Ethan said, hiccuping around the words. We didn't finish. We will, Emily said, a smile like a promise taped together. Tomorrow. Marco coordinated extraction like choreography. A back stairwell, a service exit, a car with a blanket, and a med kit that smelled like alcohol and cotton. The PT squeezed Ethan's shoulder. You did perfect, she said, voice steady, because hers had to be. The receptionist handed over a scarf like talisman. People helped. They always did when fear had a face and orders had a point. In the SUV, Emily leaned back, white around the mouth, but unwilling to fade. Ethan's hand never left hers. Tell me a story, he whispered. A pilot who forgot how to fly, she said, words thin but true, and learned again, one lever at a time. Vincent rode up front, profile carved in resolve. He called someone, Dr. Klein, now, and another someone, lock down the gate, and then no one. Because there are moments when a man runs out of orders and is left with vows. The city slid by, trees, brick, winter, people who didn't know a war had just been invited to dinner. At the estate, the gates opened like the house had been holding its breath, and for once, it exhaled with relief instead of rumor. Emily stepped into a life where protection had teeth, and kindness would need armor. Soft morning light filtered through white curtains, the kind that made a room feel newly washed. Emily woke to the gentle ache in her ribs and the weight of a small hand threaded through hers. Ethan had fallen asleep in a chair beside the bed, sometime before dawn, head tipped at an awkward angle, fingers refusing to let go. The air smelled faintly of eucalyptus and clean cotton. Dr. Klein's careful work had left tidy steri strips where chaos had tried to leave a mark. Vincent stood at the window, a dark shape against the pale lawn. He didn't turn when he spoke. She was caught. Lydia. His voice had the flat calm of a man who'd already used the anger it came with. She sold our security schedules to Caruso. He paid her to hurt us. Emily blinked the sleep away and shifted, slow. You didn't kill her? He shook his head, eyes on the glass. No, I gave her to the FBI. I've killed enough ghosts for one lifetime. Silence took a seat between them. The house listened. Heating humming, hallway settling, somewhere a distant door closing with deliberate care. Ethan stirred and squeezed her fingers twice, a secret code he'd invented for, I'm here. She squeezed back the same. Finally, Vincent spoke again. You walked in with a bowl of soup and made me believe in redemption. Emily let a small smile find its way to her face. Maybe it's not redemption. Maybe it's just love, the kind that doesn't ask for anything back. He turned then, not all the way, enough to show a profile that wore grief and stubbornness like a suit. Love without ledger, he said, tasting the words as if they might dissolve. Marco appeared in the doorway, knocked once on the frame, and waited. Feds took Lydia at O'Hare, he reported. She sang on the ride. Caruso's safe apartments in Bucktown and Bridgeport are already under watch. We'll adjust routes and rotate drivers until their net stops twitching. His gaze slid to Ethan, softened, returned to business. Media's cooled, lawyers did their ballet. Good, Vincent said. No more clinics without full lockdown. Bring the PT here until further notice. Already on the calendar. Marco vanished like punctuation. Emily eased upright. Payne argued, then negotiated. Ethan? She whispered. He blinked awake, hair mussed, the brave boy mask sliding on and off his face. You're okay? I am. Sore, but okay. She nodded toward the garden. Want air? 10 minutes later, bundled in sweaters and a blanket Emily pretended not to need, they made their careful way to the south terrace. The garden had remembered it was winter, but flirted with spring anyway. bare branches drawn like ink, patches of snow thinning into memory, a stubborn robin interrogating the ground. On a wrought iron table sat a notebook and two sharpened pencils. Ethan tugged her hand toward the chair. "I started a story," he said shyly. "The dragon who learned to love again." She smiled. "Sounds impossible." "That's why it's good." He opened to a page where block letters marched like little soldiers. He read aloud. "The dragon used to breathe fire because that's what people expected. But one day, he saw a small village where no one ran when he arrived. They just put out bowls of soup." Emily laughed, soft, delighted. Bold villagers. "They made him warm from the inside," he said, cheeks pinking. "So he tried not to burn anything. It was hard." "Hard isn't the same as wrong," she said. "Keep going." He wrote while she watched, pencil whispering across paper. Chef Lila appeared with tea and toast cut into easy triangles. "Only because the patient requested shapes," she said, nodding at Ethan's grin. "Nurse's orders." She left the tray and the smallest wink. Upstairs, behind the glass, Vincent stood again at the window but didn't retreat from it. Mrs. Aldridge came to his side, hands folded precisely. "Family breakfast is at 9, she said. "If that still applies." "It does," he answered, as if the word itself could hold a door open. She hesitated. "Sir, regarding Ms. Carter's parents, security posted discreetly. Medications delivered on schedule. They insisted on paying for the doorman's holiday fund." A line eased in his forehead. "Good." He almost smiled. "Send flowers. From Ethan." "Of course." He watched the garden. Boy, woman, notebook, steam from a teacup rising like a blessing that didn't need a priest. Hope had been a threat in his world because it asked for change. Today it felt like a debt he wanted to owe. On the terrace, Ethan set the pencil down. "Do dragons get second chances?" "They do when they choose them," Emily said. "And what about people?" "Same rule." He thought about that, turned it over like a chess piece in his mind. "Then I think my dragon needs help learning. Like a pilot who forgot how to fly." "One lever at a time," she said, and his smile told her he knew she understood the code. Footsteps on stone. Vincent came out without an entourage, hands empty, no armor but a coat. He took the chair opposite them and looked not at the wound he couldn't undo, but at the boy and the page he could help fill. "What's the opening line?" he asked. Ethan read it again, louder this time. The words hung in the crisp air and didn't break. Vincent listened all the way to the end of the paragraph, then did something small and enormous. He leaned in. "What does the dragon eat when he's not eating knights?" Ethan considered. "Grilled cheese." "Reasonable," Vincent said, straight-faced. They sat like that, 3 points of a triangle that finally felt less like a standoff and more like a shape that could hold. The house, all glass and stone, learned a new sound. Pencil on paper, a boy's laugh, an adult silence that didn't feel like danger. Walls came down, not with a crash, but with hinges oiled and a door opening to let winter light in. Somewhere far from the garden, men in suits with earpieces shifted plans and drew quieter maps. Caruso's name moved from whisper to docket. Lydia's badge sat in an evidence bag, a small square of what-ifs. And in a world that kept score in blood, a different kind of math began. Choices made without ledgers, protection measured in bowls of soup, and a dragon learning a new way to breathe. 3 days later, every staff member stood assembled in the grand hall. A corridor of marble that used to echo with footsteps and orders. Vincent's voice carried clean through the space, measured, undeniable. "From this day forward, Miss Carter isn't staff, she's family. Anyone who disrespects her, disrespects me." The words landed like a signature that couldn't be forged. Marco folded his arms and nodded once. The guard teams aligned like clockwork that had finally learned the time. Even Mrs. Aldridge lowered her head. "I was wrong about her, sir." Emily didn't bask. She met the house with a steady gaze that said rules could stand next to kindness, and both would hold. What happened next wasn't magic. It was practice. Doors stayed open longer. The lights dimmed at dinner because Ethan said the food tasted better when the room felt warm. Chef Lila started leaving recipe cards on the counter so Ethan could circle ingredients he liked and draw stars next to the ones he wanted to try. The music came back, jazz in the afternoons, old soul on Saturdays, vinyl scratching like memory with a heartbeat. The house that once sounded like a museum now rang with laughter, not loud, not careless, just real. And then, because bodies learn what love repeats, Ethan pushed up from his chair one quiet morning, looked at the parallel bars he'd outgrown, and took his first steps without the wheelchair. One, then two, then a third that wobbled and held. He laughed mid-step and caught Emily's sleeve, surprised at himself and not surprised at all. "See?" she breathed, eyes bright. "Slow is smart." "Slow is smart," he echoed, and kept going. By evening, the grand table lay undisturbed under its heavy chandelier. They chose the small kitchen table instead, the one by the window where snow softened the edge of the world. Vincent arrived without an entourage, sleeves rolled, the day's weight checked at the threshold. He set 3 plates down, grilled cheese triangles, tomato soup, a bowl of oatmeal because a boy had asked for cinnamon, no raisins. Emily poured water, steam curling like a quiet blessing. They ate the way families eat when no one is performing, interrupting gently, laughing at nothing, letting silence mean comfort rather than trouble. "Papa," Ethan said, smiling, "Miss Carter taught me that even dragons can be kind." Vincent chuckled softly, a sound that used to be rare and now felt like a language returning. "She taught me that too." He met Emily's eyes and didn't look away. Gratitude, yes, and something steadier than debt. After dinner, they cleared the table together, an unremarkable choreography that felt like the point. Marco knocked once to deliver an update with edges rounded. Lydia in custody, Caruso's shadow shrinking under daylight, roots secure, press board and moving on. Vincent thanked him and shut the door, not on the world, just on the idea that fear needed a seat at this table. They played a short game of chess. Ethan trapped a knight and grinned. "Check. Soon." "Soon," Vincent agreed, and let the boy earn it. When the board reset, Emily slid a notebook across. "What happens next to your dragon?" Ethan drew a small village with bowls of soup lined like lanterns. "He learns to breathe warm, not fire," he said. "Takes practice." The camera fades in your mind. A simple meal, warm light, snow falling outside. 3 figures at a kitchen table that could be anywhere, except it's exactly here. In a city built on power and fear, one act of kindness became the only thing stronger than both. It made a family. That's the truth that stayed when headlines forgot, when the gate closed against weather, when old ghosts learned to sit without shouting. Kindness didn't fix everything. It trained courage to show up. It taught boundaries to hold. It gave hope a map. It looked like soup offered without permission slips. It looked like a boy choosing crunchy or soft. It looked like a man lowering a gun and raising a son. It looked like a woman who refused to let rules outrank love. If this story moved you even a little, stay with us. Tap like so the next person finds it. Subscribe to keep walking with Emily, Ethan, and Vincent as they practice the kind of strength that feeds more than it burns. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from and what hope looks like where you are. Your words keep this table warm. Thank you for spending time with us tonight. See you in the next story.